All right, would you pray with me? Father God, thank you for your word, and that your word reveals you. God, help us to not look at this as an instruction manual or as anything less than the revelation of who you are to us. Show us who you are today, Lord Jesus. And it is in your name we pray. Amen. Mark chapter 15, verses 1 through 15. Very early in the morning, the chief priests, with the elders, the teachers of the law, and the whole Sanhedrin, made their plans. So they bound Jesus, led him away, and handed him over to Pilate. "Are you the king of the Jews?" asked Pilate. "You said so," Jesus replied. The chief priests accused him of many things. So again Pilate asked him, "Aren't you going to answer? See how many things they are accusing you of?" But Jesus still made no reply, and Pilate was amazed. Now it was the custom at the festival to release a prisoner whom the people requested. A man called Barabbas was in prison with the insurrectionists who had committed murder in the uprising. The crowd came. They came up and asked Pilate to do for them what he usually did. "Do you want me to release to you the king of the Jews?" asked Pilate, knowing it was out of self-interest that the chief priest had handed Jesus over to him. But the chief priest stirred up the crowd and to have Pilate release Barabbas instead. "Well, what shall I do then with the one you call the king of the Jews?" Pilate asked them. "Crucify him," they shouted. "Why? What crime has he committed?" asked Pilate. But they shouted all the louder, "Crucify him!" Wanting to satisfy the crowd, Pilate released Barabbas to them. He had Jesus flogged and handed him over to be crucified. He leaned back in his seat, trying not to smirk, because they got him. For the last few years, they had been trying to trap him in his words, but right now, they got him. And so in a moment, the room erupted. "Blasphemy! How dare he speak of Adonai in this way?" And then he stood up and he tore his outer cloak in two, and Caiaphas, in a fit of rage, shouted, "Why do we need any more witnesses? You have heard the blasphemy. What do you think?" And the rest of the room agreed. They voted and condemned him to death. They began to beat him and spit on him, and they tied him and then blindfolded him and struck him over and over again, laughing and yelling and saying, "Prophesy! Who hit you?" And then they motioned for the guards to help them take him away to the Romans, for the Romans were the only ones who could pass the death sentence. And Caiaphas, seemingly inconsolable with anger, said to himself, "We got him." See, Caiaphas, he wasn't really all that angry. He was more relieved than anything, because they had some ammo. They had everything they needed to fix this Jesus problem once and for all. What evidence did they have? Well, it was an answer to a question. Caiaphas kind of patted himself on the back. It was a genius question, after all. "Are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed One?" I mean, it was loaded. Every good Jew knows that to claim to be the Son of God was blasphemy. And this Jesus, this Nazarene, he hadn't stopped claiming it. And no true Messiah, no true rescuer of the people would ever claim that, because no true Messiah, no true rescuer of the people would ever commit blasphemy. And so it wasn't just, "Are you the Messiah?" Caiaphas added on to the end, "Are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed One?" A simple yes would have been all that they needed to accuse him of this grievous sin of blasphemy. But Jesus gave them what they needed and more. "I am," said Jesus, "and you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One and coming on the clouds of heaven." Oh, boy. He said it. I am. That name, that only belongs to Adonai. And not only that, he brought in the prophet Daniel. Daniel chapter 7 and the Son of Man coming on the clouds. And they were really mystified with what to do with this passage. But what they knew was that it only could be said of God. I mean, this Son of Man in this passage is given sovereign power and glory. Only God gets that. All the peoples and all the nations worship Him. I mean, to claim that, oh boy, we got Him. This is blasphemy. This Jesus gave them everything that they needed. So Caiaphas was beside himself. See, this Nazarene had caused them enough trouble. He had questioned this council enough, these teachers enough. Even the people were beginning to question them. And they can't have that because the people must be under the law. The people must obey Adonai. These people can't question God. And certainly they don't need to be questioning God's men. The priests, the rabbis, the Pharisees, they just wouldn't do. They had to keep control. So now, we'll take care of this blasphemer, thought Caiaphas. But Rome wouldn't like us to take matters into our own hands, so we're going to take it to Rome. So very early in the morning, the chief priests, the elders, and the teachers of the law, and the whole Sanhedrin made their plans. So they bound Jesus and led him away and handed him over to Pilate. They left the house of Caiaphas and marched through the city. And of course, people were seeing them march with this one who had marched into the city just a few days before to the praise and to the honor and to the glory of all the people that were there. And as they went, they roughly dragged this Messiah, spitting at him and ridiculing him and hissing, "Blasphemer," as they went. They came finally to the palace of Herod the Great, long ago abandoned because Herod had died and a new Herod had replaced him, and he wasn't so great. But the Romans still used this palace, and this is where the governor was. They shouted from the court of the palace, "Let us in, come on out, we have a criminal here." And the doors opened, and Caiaphas grabbed this Galilean and shoved him to the ground in front of the governor. Pilate, though, wouldn't give two figs if this Nazarene was a blasphemer. The Romans didn't worship Adonai. But Rome, Caiaphas knew what Rome did worship. They worshiped their own power. So Caiaphas, as he walked through this city, cooked up another accusation, another scheme. He told Pilate, this man, he's claiming to be the king of the Jews. And he saw Pilate's eyes widen and beads of sweat begin to form on his forehead. Oh, we've got him, thought Caiaphas. Pilate wanted nothing to do with a Jewish uprising. He'd have to put Jesus down. He'd have to take care of their problem. Pilate's attention snapped to the man trying to pick himself up off the floor. "Are you the king of the Jews?" The man, now standing fully, let out a sigh. "You said so." Caiaphas and the boys knew what to do. They all started shouting, "He's a blasphemer! He's rebelling against Caesar! He leads a rebellion!" And Pilate put up a hand, silencing them. And so Pilate asked him, "Aren't you going to answer? See how many things they are accusing you of?" As Pilate finished gesturing around the room, he met the gaze of this accused man and waited for a reply. None came. This upstart Messiah didn't have a modicum of respect for his superiors. And Pilate began to pace around, thinking. He took this Jesus into his house and appeared to question him for a couple hours. Caiaphas and his friends waited anxiously. This had to work. By now, a crowd had begun to gather. And Caiaphas and his crew got to work, and he began to talk to the crowd. "Is this your Messiah?" he said. "A blasphemer." Another priest spoke up. "He won't even stand up to Rome." And gradually, the tone of the crowd shifted. They started to become angry. Anger's good. I can work with anger, thought Caiaphas. And after a couple hours, Pilate and this Nazarene reemerged. And Pilate, looking out to the crowd, said, "You know it's the custom to release to you a prisoner at Passover. Do you want me to release to you the king of the Jews?" "Absolutely not," thought Caiaphas. "This man has turned the people against him and his friends one too many times. Now it is time to turn the people against him." "No," shouted Caiaphas as an idea formed in his head. "Give us Barabbas." The people would want Barabbas. He wasn't weak like this Jesus. He knew how to stand up to the Romans. "Yeah, give us Barabbas," a woman shouted from the crowd. And then it all broke loose. The people began to chant the name of this rebel and this killer. "Barabbas! Barabbas! We want Barabbas!" And Caiaphas noticed the color begin to drain from Pilate's face. "What shall I do then with the one you call King of the Jews?" "Crucify him," a single man shouted. "Crucify him!" Crucify! 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 And the crowd began to chant. Why, what crime has he committed? Asked Pilate. But the chant continued. Crucify! Crucify! And the plan was working. They were finally going to rid themselves of this menace. Finally, some order would be restored. Some control would be returned to whom it rightly belongs. And Pilate motioned for the guards to grab Jesus, to take him away to be dealt with, to die. And finally Caiaphas could breathe again. The problem, it was over. Sarah walked out of her house that morning with really nothing to do. With the festival going on, as a vegetable saleswoman, Sarah had kind of gone through all of her wares. Everybody had bought all of the roots and all of the veggies and all of the herbs that they would need to celebrate the festival of Passover with their Seder meals. And so she really had nothing to do. Things had become quiet. She finally had a moment to breathe and decided to go for a walk. As she walked out the door, she heard a commotion several streets over. She paid it no mind. It was Passover week, after all, and the city had nearly quadrupled in size. It's bound to be a little craziness. But something didn't sit right about the sounds that she was hearing. It didn't sound like the joyous sounds of the festival. It sounded angry, disturbing. There was no joy in these yells, and against her better judgment, she went to investigate. As she moved through the streets of the inner city, she noticed several people moving in the same direction. Well, they're probably just curious like I am, I think. And so she thought to herself, and finally she found the source of the commotion. It was the courtyard of the old palace. She saw a group of men dressed in traditional black robes. They were shoving around a man dressed in simple clothes. He was ordinary enough, a short beard, plain hair. In fact, she had no idea who he was had she not seen him marching into the city just a few days ago on the back of a donkey, to the shouts and the praises of all of the people as they laid down palm branches before him. No, she knew who this was. She knew this Jesus. In fact, she had had such high hopes for him. She had been in the crowd that day and chanted Hosanna with everybody else. She had longed for the Messiah just like everyone else. And she was ready for Israel's independence. And she was ready for him to get down to the business of taking care of the Romans. That's why it was so strange. What kind of Messiah allows himself to be roughed up by a few religious men? She watched them shove him into the courtyard of the palace and demand to see the governor. The governor came out clearly not ready to start his day, and Sarah could hardly hear what was going on, but she saw the governor called Pilate get quite uncomfortable. And then she heard him ask loudly, "Are you the king of the Jews?" She watched this man who'd been so triumphal just a few days ago, as he entered the city with his great procession, pick himself up off the floor, dust himself off, sigh, and say, "You've said so." The group of men who'd Sarah determined were the chief priests erupted, saying and accusing Jesus of blasphemy, among many other things. So again, Pilate asked him, "Well, aren't you going to answer? See how many things they're accusing you of." But still Jesus made no reply. So she watched Pilate motion for his men to grab Jesus and took him inside, and time began to tick. As the growing group waited for them to once again emerge from the palace, she saw the chief priests get to work. "Is this the Messiah that you want, people? Do you want someone who can't even stand up to Rome?" And as she spoke, Sarah thought to herself, he's not who I thought he'd be. What kind of conquering king lets himself get arrested? As time went on, Sarah actually began to be embarrassed with herself. How could she have worshipped and praised this weak man? This isn't the Messiah. This is a blasphemer and a betrayer, and he should face justice. And as Pilate reemerged with Jesus and looked out at the crowd, he said, "You know it's the custom to release a prisoner during Passover. Do you want me to release the king of the Jews?" asked Pilate. But the chief priest stirred up the crowd to have Pilate release Barabbas instead. And she found herself chanting with everyone else, "Barabbas!" At least he'd fight back. "Give us Barabbas!" At least he wouldn't blaspheme against God. "We want Barabbas!" And Sarah witnessed the shoulders of Pilate kind of slump. And he asked, "What shall I do then with the one you call the King of the Jews?" And Sarah, without thinking, shouted, "Crucify him!" And Pilate looked at her and asked, "Why? What crime has he committed?" But then the crowd erupted, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" And wanting to satisfy the crowd, Pilate released Barabbas to them. He had Jesus flogged and handed him over to be crucified. And Sarah thought to herself, "I'm getting pretty tired of these fake messiahs. It'd be real nice if a real one came along." She sort of sauntered away, ready to celebrate the festival, and glad to be done with that messy business. He had just awoken when he heard a loud knock on the door in his private quarters. His men knew better than to bother him before it was time to hold court. As he began to dress himself and wash his face, he heard the knock once again. Pilate tore across the room and ripped the door open and said, "What do you want?" "Sir, I apologize," one of his men said. The Jews, they're outside demanding to see you. And so, they can wait. They're not anybody special. "Sir, I think you need to see this." Pilate, growing impatient, followed the legionnaire through the palace to the outside court. As he walked outside into the sunlight, he rubbed his groggy eyes and looked out to see a small crowd beginning to gather. "Well, this can't be good," he thought to himself. It's never good when crowds get worked up. As Romans, one thing they could offer people that they ruled over was peace, was the Pax Romana. And to interrupt that peace, Pilate, it's kind of his job to keep it. He could lose his head for that. He'd already had a couple of close run-ins. Early in his tenure, he wanted to impress Caesar, and he had all these shields brought into the city and hung up in the temple with Caesar's image on it. And the people, they didn't like that. They didn't like the image of other gods in their temple, and so they threw a fit and ended up kind of laying on his lawn, demanding that he give in and take down the shields, to which he did. And they really didn't like it when he used some temple money to build an aqueduct, and he didn't give in then, but it was teetering on the edge of chaos. And so when he sees a group of Jewish leaders in his front lawn and they're gathering other people around him, he begins to sweat a little bit. This could be dangerous. Pilate was on thin ice with Rome already. And so this morning, seeing a group of these angry Jewish men, he began to feel his heart race. He had to play this well. As he was processing all of this, they shoved a simple-looking man down in front of him, and before he had a chance to think, they said, "This man was claiming to be the king of the Jews." Oh no. Sure, Herod was king. They had a king of the Jews, but they could control Herod. Rome was in charge. Rome was king. Caesar was king. And Pilate knew, and these Jews knew, that there was really no king but Caesar. He understood he's in some dangerous territory here. And as sweat began to pool on his forehead, Pilate spoke up, "Are you the king of the Jews?" He had to get to the bottom of this. And Pilate watched, both impatient and fearful, as the man rose from the ground and began to dust himself off. Half sighing, he said, "You said so." And immediately, the chief priests who had flung this royal claimant before him burst out one after another, accusing him of all sorts of things. Blasphemy. Pilate cared very little about that. Rebellion against Rome, which concerned Pilate quite a bit, and stirring up crowds, which Pilate could not have. Pilate raised his hand, quieting the growing crowd before him. And again Pilate asked him, "Aren't you going to answer? See how many things they are accusing you of." But Jesus still made no reply. And Pilate was amazed. He had to get to the bottom of this. And he motioned for one of the legionnaires to grab this man and bring him inside. Once they were shut in the palace, he began to take a moment to gather his thoughts. And Pilate then went back inside the palace, and he summoned Jesus and asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" "Is that your own idea?" Jesus asked. "Or did you talk to others about me?" "Am I a Jew?" Pilate replied. "Your own people and chief priests handed you over to me. What is it that you have done?" And Jesus said, "My kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jewish leaders. But now my kingdom is from another place." "You are a king then," said Pilate. Jesus answered, "You say I am a king. In fact, the reason I was born and came into the world is to testify to the truth. Everyone that's on the side of truth listens to me." "What is truth?" retorted Pilate. I mean, Pilate was a politician after all, and truth for politicians is what it needed to be. But this man mystified Pilate. He motioned for a soldier and whispered to him. He wanted another set of ears on this. The soldier grabbed Jesus and snuck him out the back and took him to Herod Antipas. And an hour and a half went by, and Jesus returned from the questioning. One of Pilate's men handed him a handwritten note which declared that Herod found no reason to charge the man. Pilate stared at this, and having already heard from his wife, have nothing to do with the man. I've had some troublesome dreams. Herod really didn't know what to do. And an idea sprung to the forefront of his mind. He remembered what week it was. And he might be able to use this to his advantage. Now, it was the custom at the festival to release a prisoner whom the people requested. Pilate quickly strode out into the court once again. And maybe they'd make it easy on him this time. But that wasn't the case. A man called Barabbas was in prison with the insurrectionists who had committed murder in the uprising. "Do you want me to release the king of the Jews?" asked Pilate, knowing it was out of self-interest that the chief priest had handed Jesus over to him. But the chief priest stirred up the crowd to have Pilate release Barabbas instead. "Well, what shall I do with the one you call the king of the Jews?" Pilate asked him. "Crucify him," they shouted. "Why, what crime has he committed?" asked Pilate. But they shouted all the louder, "Crucify him!" Wanting to satisfy the crowd, Pilate released Barabbas to them. He had Jesus flogged and handed him over to be crucified. Pilate had to wash his hands of this because the situation was out of control. And if he lets it get any more crazy, Rome would have his head. So better the head of Jesus than his own. Pilate re-entered the palace, had the doors locked. He was done for today. Crisis averted. Crucify! Crucify! Well, I guess it's time, he thought to himself. As he lay staring at the puddle of water on the floor of his cell, Barabbas knew his time had come. This is what you get. He knew this. This is what you get when you go up against Rome. Now, he couldn't help himself. They were tyrants, after all, and the prophets had to say a lot about tyranny and how God wanted to throw it off. Not to mention the book of Exodus, about God's people being freed from their tyrant oppressors. No, Barabbas knew the words of Adonai, and he knew he had to fight back. So Barabbas took matters into his own hands. But didn't really work out. Sure, Barabbas had killed a few Romans and Roman sympathizers, but they stomped that little skirmish outright quick and then threw him in there to wait. Threw him in this cell to die. So when Barabbas heard the shouts of "Crucify" that morning, he knew his time had come. Not long after that, the door to his cell burst open and 2 guards appeared. They unshackled him from the floor and led him through the prison out the door. I'm walking to my death, he thought to himself. And they moved him quickly through the city to the old palace of Herod the Great. And he could hear the chants from earlier, but they began to shift. "Barabbas! Give us Barabbas!" And they were chanting his name. They moved through the crowd to a small stage in the courtyard of the old palace. On one side of the stage, there was a rather unsuspecting man. In the middle, there was no mistaking one of his worst enemies, the blaspheming Gentile, the blaspheming pagan, Pilate. He did his best to hiss and to spit in his general direction. That's the least this Roman scum deserved. Pilate paid him no mind. Arrogant Romans. "Do you want me to release to you the king of the Jews?" asked Pilate. Was it Passover already? Barabbas thought to himself. He knew the traditions. Every year, prisoners released every Passover. And so that's why he was in here. He never claimed to be king of the Jews. And that's when it occurred to him. He knew who the other man on the stage was. It was the Galilean. It was Jesus. So Barabbas really was going to die. He heard all about this man. How he healed the sick, how he cured the blind, how he cast out demons. Surely the people are going to pick him. But the chief priest stirred up the crowd to have Pilate release Barabbas instead. Barabbas was floored. He scarcely noticed as the legionnaires cut his bonds and shoved him into the crowd. In a matter of seconds, he went from being sure he was going to die on a Roman cross to being free once again. And immediately a thought crossed his mind. These Romans are fools. They let the wrong guy go. Barabbas was sure of one thing. He wouldn't go quietly into the night. Back to business. As he made his way back to the back of the crowd where his close friends and his followers were whooping and hollering, he scarcely heard Pilate. "What shall I do then with the one you call the King of the Jews?" Pilate asked them. "Crucify him," they shouted. "Why? What crime has he committed?" asked Pilate. But they shouted all the louder, "Crucify him." But that didn't matter, because the one being crucified wasn't Barabbas. And that's all that he cared about. It was already beginning to feel like too much. The weight of what was happening began to press into his heart, and he could feel it in his very soul. He felt his chest tighten minute by minute. In fact, he had never felt this feeling before. It felt wrong. He knew what it was, of course. He knew why he had come. But that didn't make Jesus' first experience of guilt and of shame any easier, any more tolerable. Very early in the morning, the chief priests with the elders, the teachers of the law, and the whole Sanhedrin made their plans. So they bound Jesus and led him away and handed him over to Pilate. As they made their way through the city, Jesus, he felt the shame and he felt the regret and the anger of the men who surrounded him. He was beginning to experience these things for the first time. He looked up and saw him. Caiaphas. Oh, Caiaphas. I wanted so much more from you. I created in you a deep love for the words of Adonai. I wish you had seen how much they told you. I love you. You love the things of God, but you don't love His people. You place such a burden on others, but I know why. I know it's because you never feel like you're enough. I know it's because you make yourself out to be a religious fanatic, but when the door closes at night, you're just as broken as everyone else. I know what you really do. It's why I called you a whitewashed tomb. You are clean on the outside, but the inside is still so messed up. And Caiaphas, someday I hope you see, I'm doing this for you. I'm doing this to clean the inside up, to make you new. It's okay, Caiaphas. I'm not angry. I'm not mad at you for this. I have to do this. I hope you see. I hope you see that I love you, and I have to do this. I have to do this for you. Caiaphas takes Jesus and he throws him down on the ground. And Jesus can scarcely get himself up off the ground before he hears a voice. "Are you the king of the Jews?" asked Pilate. Jesus sighs. He's so tired of the politics. Wish they could see how much bigger this all is. "You said so," said Jesus. And in that moment, Jesus locked eyes with Pilate. Pilate. I know you. I know that you make much of yourself, but underneath the facade of toughness, you're scared. You're scared that if you don't get this right, all of this right, they're going to come for you. They're going to kill you. I know that you're scared. And your whole life you've been earning, you've been grinding, you've been trying to get to the top. And now that you're here, you found it's just as scary as the bottom. There's no hope up there, is there? Pilate, I wish that you'd see. I know that you're going to send me to my death, but I wish that you'd see I'm doing it for you. That with me as your king, you don't have to worry about me destroying you if you fail. You don't have to worry about earning your place. I offer it to you for free. Pilate, I'm not mad at you. I have to do this. I have to do this for you. The chief priests accused him of many things. So again, Pilate asked him, "Aren't you going to answer? See how many things they're accusing you of?" But Jesus still made no reply, and Pilate was amazed. It was the custom at the festival to release a prisoner whom the people requested. A man called Barabbas was in prison with the insurrectionists who had committed murder in the uprising. But the crowd came up and asked Pilate to do for them what he usually did. As Jesus stood there, feeling the weight of the brokenness of everyone around him, he saw her. Sarah, Sarah, I saw you in that crowd just a few days ago, cheering my name, longing for me, for my reign. Sarah, your whole life you have worried what everyone else has thought. You went with the flow even when it didn't feel right because you desperately wanted to fit in. You desperately wanted a place. You wanted acceptance. Sarah, I wish you'd see, with me, I will always accept you. With me, you don't have to say the right things, do the right things to find acceptance. I offer it freely. You get to be a part of my family. Sarah, I'm not mad at you. I'm not mad at anyone in this crowd. I have to do this. I have to do this for you. Do you want me to release to you the king of the Jews? Asked Pilate, knowing it was out of self-interest that the chief priest had handed Jesus over to him. But the chief priest stirred up the crowd to have Pilate release Barabbas instead. As he moved through the crowd, Jesus saw him. Barabbas. Oh, Barabbas. I love you. I wish you'd see that. Your whole life you've been fighting, clawing, trying to destroy the enemy. But you found every time when you destroy one enemy, another one pops up and another one's around the corner because destroying enemies creates more enemies. And you're in this cycle of hatred and you don't know how to get out. Barabbas, I wish you'd see. The cross I'm about to get on, it's the cross that was meant for you. I wish you'd see this picture, that I'm taking your place, but not just yours, everyone else's. That everyone is like you, Barabbas, that they deserve the cross, that you deserve the cross, but I don't want it for them, so I'm going to take it. Barabbas, I'm not mad at you. I wish that you would see that with me the cycle ends. That we love our enemies. We pray for those who persecute us. That with me, you can find rest. Barabbas, I'm not mad at you. I have to do this. I have to do this for you. What shall I do then with the one you call King of the Jews? Pilate asked them. Crucify him, they shouted. Why? What crime has he committed? Asked Pilate. But they shouted all the louder, Crucify him. Wanting to satisfy the crowd, Pilate released Barabbas to them. He had Jesus flogged and handed him over to be crucified. And as Jesus had the skin torn from his back, he was thinking about Barabbas, he was thinking about Pilate, he was thinking about Sarah, he was thinking about Caiaphas, and he was thinking about you. He was thinking about me. That he knows what we do behind closed doors. He says, I know that you put on a church face, but as you walk out of this building, you're just as broken as everyone else. I know the hatred in your heart. I know the lust that fuels you. I know the brokenness you face every day. And I'm not mad because I have to do this. I have to do this for you.
Your name is cursed, and my name is praised. But it wasn't always this way. The world was waiting for you, the prophesied one, the one Micah predicted in Bethlehem come. King David named you Lord 1,000 years before this day, which is why I find it odd that your name is cursed and my name is praised. You're the image bearer of Isaac, following his father, You're the one Isaiah saw as a lamb led to the slaughter. The psalmist called you a stone rejected by the builders, and Jeremiah knew you'd be betrayed for 30 coins of silver. So how did you not know that this would be the end? Did you not know your betrayer would be a friend? It's always a surprise who will backstab us. I should know. Because your name is Jesus, and my name is Barabbas. Yes, I heard about you. You're that teacher the Pharisees despise. You tell the blind to go in peace right after you open their eyes. You command demons to come out. You heal the crippled and the deaf. The lepers shout your name. You told Lazarus to wake from death. But if you're so powerful, then why are you on that tree? Why am I the criminal on this hillside standing free? Why didn't you speak up? Where was all of heaven's descent? We all know my name was guilty and your name innocent. Those should have been my chains. That should have been my robe. Now your name is crucify and my name is let him go. That was my flogging, my beating, my skin. But now your name is death row and my name is forgiven. That was my spit, my ridicule, my gasp, my worry. That was my Via Dolorosa and my burden that you carried. Those were my thorns. That was meant to be my crown. It should have been my blood that was dripping on the ground. Those were my nails, my wrists in wretched perforation. Those were my desperate lungs resisting suffocation. That was my punishment, my wrath, my justice on display. Do you see? My name is death, and your name is pain. Who are you, Jesus? To sacrifice for liars, for cheaters, for the rotten, for thieves, for a good man one might die. But then, why would you die for me? Do you not see my anger, my wickedness and malice? I know your name is Jesus, but do you know my name's Barabbas? Are you a friend of sinners? Why invite me to your table? Do you know I was a murderer? I am Cain. You are Abel. Are you the Father run to me? Because I am prodigal, unworthy. My name is undeserving, but your name must be mercy. I am Gomer, unfaithful, but you still call me bride. I am one who ran away. Your name is Leave the 99. My name is fatherless, abandoned. Your name is Welcome Home. In a world of dreadful kings, you're the king who left his throne. Do you not see? This is a scandal. How reckless could you be? That was my mocking you endured. That was my place on Calvary. That was my spear that stuck into your side. That was my sorrow, my grief, my suffering in your eyes. Years of my rebellion, years of condemnation. Who are you to hang there bearing my humiliation? That was my sin, my shame, my pain, and my cause. You took what I deserved. Jesus, that was my cross. And even if I doubted, never followed you, you humbled yourself into death, followed through, taking up my cross, brutal and rugged, because your name is love. And my name